Understanding taping instructions. Hey everyone, I'm Matthew Cornwell with Get Taped here in Atlanta, Georgia, one of Atlanta's original audition taping services, which I co-own with my amazingly talented, beautiful wife, Brooke. And now onto our topic. Understanding taping instructions. Now, I should preface this discussion by saying that it's tailored to actors who live in the southeastern U.S. However, it should apply to any market that's been doing self-taping for a while. If you're in a market that is new to self-tapes, then consider this a look into the future. The very near future. Okay, so here in the Southeast, we have quite a few different casting offices that at any given time will have active projects. And much to the actor's lament, they all have different taping instructions. Now, they all agree on the basics of self-taping, which was established well over a decade ago here in the Southeast. Namely, good lighting, good sound, a neutral backdrop, and a reader who is not too loud or distracting. Side note for those of you who are newer to self-taping, in the beginning, even here in the Southeast, casting directors would say that your reader doesn't need to be an actor. In fact, they didn't even really want to hear the reader much at all. Use your grandma, they'll say. And I actually heard that on Clubhouse within the last few months from a casting director in Los Angeles. Eek. Because, warning, when casting directors get used to high-quality self-tapes, their standards for the reader will go up substantially. For reference, 15 years ago, casting directors here in the Southeast might have accepted a tape where your grandma was the reader. But nowadays, your grandma better be as good an actor as you. Because I've seen that in taping instructions, that the reader should be as good an actor as you. Think on that for a second. Okay, back to the main topic, taping instructions. Once you get beyond all the standards they agree upon, that's when you get into all the nuances of each casting office. Not only are the details themselves nuanced, but also in how they present those details to you. Again, much to the actor's lament, because all the casting offices present the information differently, it can be tedious trying to sort through your emails, looking for where the slate instructions are, where the taping instructions are, where the labeling instructions are. But let's talk specifics. Keep reads real, natural, and grounded. A few offices have this note, and it seems obvious to the seasoned actor. But this isn't just about broad acting or bad acting. It's about knowing the tone of the show. What's grounded for an HBO drama won't be the same as what's grounded for a single-camera comedy on a streaming service, or what's grounded for a 4-camera sitcom on a major network. So as simple as this note is, it encompasses all the homework that you need to be doing for each audition. Don't read the stage directions. It's funny because as a seasoned actor, my first thought when I saw this note was, oh, don't get caught up reading stage directions and letting the truth of what that writer is thinking for the environment or the physicality box me in for the audition. So for instance, ignore the stage directions if it says he jogs down the hall and pauses to get a sip of water from the water fountain and then straightens up his tie and saunters into the office. But while that might be true, that's not what this note actually was meant for. It was meant for actors who were actually reading stage directions as part of their dialogue. But in defense of actors who made that mistake, which it had to be quite a few for it to end up in the general taping instructions for a casting office, there are times when a writer will write stage directions that are the inner monologue of the character and can be mistaken for dialogue. For instance, let's say your character let a secret slip by saying, "I ate your sandwich and blamed it on Chauncey." And then the ensuing stage direction says, "Oh crap, that was a mistake." See how that could be interpreted as dialogue? Simple error. But what this boils down to is, as an actor, you must understand script writing conventions. It's all part of your homework as an actor, because if you don't understand this, you could end up making simple mistakes like this. Let's talk about multiple takes. Some offices require multiple takes. Some allow multiple takes by saying something like, feel free to do 2 takes, but just make sure they're different takes. And there's a huge distinction here. For example, let's say you're entering a food competition and you're going to submit your famous mac and cheese recipe. Would you submit your second to last iteration and then your final iteration of that famous recipe where the ingredients haven't changed? You're just trying multiple times to get it right. No, you wouldn't submit that second to last one, because if it's not as good as the last one, then you should just submit the last one. However, if you wanted to submit that last one, but then you're going to change from noodles to shells and add some meat, okay, now we have a different recipe, a different result with a different taste. You get the analogy? If you're going to submit multiple takes, whether it's required or whether it's just an option that they're giving you, be sure that your point of view, your tone, your pacing, rhythm, your objective, something has to be different in those 2 takes for it to be a valid second take. And for more on getting that second take, see the link in the description below for a previous video we did on this topic. Now let's talk about props and costumes. Some casting offices say no props, no costumes. Others encourage props, especially if it's for commercials. So make sure you read the fine print. But even if it says no props and you're holding something out of frame, they'll never know. So, for example, if you're a doctor and you want to hold that clipboard because it makes you feel more grounded in the scene, do it. Because you can't see it right now, and if that's helping me feel like I'm a doctor, then what harm does it do? Casting will never know. Similarly, if I'm auditioning for a police officer who's writing up a ticket, then I should be holding an actual pen and paper instead of miming it, because holding the pen and paper will help me feel more grounded in the scene, and casting will never know what's happening below the edge of frame. Side note, why not make that paper that's out of frame my script? That way, if I'm looking down to jot a note, I can also be grabbing my next line if I'm not fully off book for this audition. Bottom line, props can help ground you in this imaginary world, and if casting can't see it, then they'll never know the difference, so go ahead and do it. Problem solved. For costumes, on the other hand, clearly that's something that will show up in frame, and the general wisdom for this is dress towards the character with items you already have in your closet that you are not afraid to be seen in public in. So if you're a doctor in real life, well, then don't be afraid to wear that lab coat. Just maybe hold off on the stethoscope. But don't go buying something just for the audition, thinking that dressing the part will somehow give you a leg up. It won't. Now let's talk about how scripts are marked up for auditions. Some casting offices meticulously mark up starts and stops and which lines to skip, etc. Some casting offices don't put anything on the scripts, either because they just didn't take the time to scrutinize, they don't care where you start or stop, or quite honestly, they might be too busy to have really gotten into the nitty-gritty of where you should start and where you should stop and which lines you may or may not skip. There was even one casting director who put descriptive notes on every audition side to help you with context and backstory. Oh, I miss you, Alpha Tyler. Either way, you should pay really close attention to how that script has been marked up, and for maybe the reasons you're not assuming. For instance, let's say there's a start, and then 3 lines into the scene, that's where your character enters. Well, should you have the reader read those lines while you stand off screen for 8 seconds? No. Start with your entrance. Likewise, if your character exits before the end of the scene, that's where you should end. Don't walk off screen and have the reader keep reading useless lines of dialogue to a blank screen. Doesn't make any sense. Consider that an oversight from the casting office. It happens often. Now, if they've marked up a start and stop, but within that start and stop, there's actually several scenes. Well, now the question is, do you actually record this montage of scenes as one file, or do you break it up where those scenes change? Well, if there's a consistency in your character's point of view, tone, emotion, physicality, just run them together. That's probably why they did that with the start and stop. On the other hand, if there is a huge time jump, emotional jump, physical jump, or other sort of tone shift between those scenes, then take the liberty to start and stop your camera, record those scenes separately, and you can always piece them back together on your editing software, and that way you still honor the start and stop when it comes to the files, but you as the actor have that chance of starting and stopping between those time jumps so that you can have time to shift and prepare for the next scene. As long as in the end you're following their instructions on how to separate files or combine files, then you can take these liberties within the start and stop if it really is important to you. What I'm really trying to say here is take ownership of your audition. Now let's talk about slate instructions, and I have a slightly controversial take on this. Let's say in your slate instructions they're asking for not just your name, height, and city, but whether or not you can be local to some other city, your willingness to change your appearance, and your conflict dates. Seems innocuous on the surface, but some of that information could technically be used as contractually binding. So if you say in your slate that you're local to Poughkeepsie, well, now casting is assuming that's true, and if that saves them money to book you as a local, you're on the hook to be local. Now, what happens when you don't know what being local really means? Maybe you don't know the implications of this. Well, that's what your agent is for, to counsel you on this. So my controversial stance on slates is I oftentimes don't give a firm answer on questions like, are you willing to work local hire to such and such? I simply say, hi, I'm Matthew Cornwall, I'm 6'2", and I'm local to Atlanta. They can infer what they want from that, and if they really need specifics, they can follow up with my agent. Now, I get it. If casting is watching this video, you're shaking your head, sighing, and maybe even yelling at the screen, because from your standpoint, you're asking these questions to speed up the process, to not slow it down by having to ask your agent, who then has to ask you, and then you have to get back to your agent, and the agent has to get back to casting. And meantime, they might be already moving on to the next actor. I get it. But as an actor, and specifically speaking for actors who don't know all the answers to all of these questions that have contractual implications, my general advice is to avoid saying things that are contractually binding in your slate. And lastly, as a taping service, we know how excruciatingly tedious it can be to keep track of all the different types of taping instructions. There are some days where we're taping actors for 6 different projects with 6 different casting directors, and we're pulling our hair out trying to keep everything straight when we're compressing and editing these files and sending them off to wherever they need to go. As an actor, since you're only dealing with your stuff, it is incumbent upon you to always know your instructions, especially if you're coming to a taping service. Don't put the burden on them. Speaking for us here at Get Taped, be sure that you know how your files need to be labeled, whether it's separate files or all combined into one, whether it needs a slate or doesn't, whether there's any other special instructions like same-day photos or NDAs. You need to know all this information. It'll make everything go much more smoothly. Whew. I know there are so many more nuances to taping instructions, so if there's something that I missed or something you want to talk about, please drop a comment below or send us an email. That's it for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on set.